Good morning. Good morning.
Hello, everyone. We see you coming in. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
We'll just give it a minute as everybody jumps into the webinar.
Good morning, everyone.
Maybe give it one more minute, 2 minutes after the hour. Feel free to type your institution where you're coming from in the chat, so we know who we got here. We can see your names, but we'd be delighted to see where you're coming from.
Good morning.
WGU. Thank you for being here with us. Okay.
All right, we will go ahead and get started this morning then. So thank you for joining us this morning. It is morning in Wyoming where we are. I'm not sure what time zone you are in, but unless you're across the world, it's probably morning. So today we are going to discuss an effective way to prepare learners to write for your classroom. So I'm Ashley Dillard. I am a Client Solutions Advisor here at Peregrine Global Services. I work with our partners and potential partners to help identify any gaps that they may have and determine how our solutions can improve the quality of their institution or company. Joining me today is my colleague, Desiree. I'll let her introduce herself this morning.
Hello, everyone. I'm Desiree Moore, the Director of Marketing and Strategic Growth, and hello to everyone who's said hi to us in the chat. I see Judith from Miami, Russell from WGU, Kathy from Oregon at George Fox University in Newburgh. So thank you all for coming in and participating in the chat. Before coming to Peregrine, I worked in higher education for about 7 years, and before that, K-12 education. I worked as an administrator and a faculty member, and we're talking about writing today, which is kind of near and dear to my heart because my first introduction into teaching was as an adjunct, and for many years I taught college English, which ended up being my favorite class to teach, just because we had so much fun and you get to see so much growth during that period. So preparing students to write for your classrooms is near and dear to my heart.
Yes, we are so lucky to have Miss Desiree on our team. So I see some of the people joining us are our existing partners, and some of you are new to Peregrine. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we believe in. But first, I want to start with a poll to see where we're at this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. So the question is, how does your institution currently prepare your learners to write academically? So I just want to see what type of processes you guys have. So maybe you have remediation is required as a prerequisite or required as a co-requisite. You might have both of those options. And then, or you have a different solution for, sorry, that's misspelled, for providing this opportunity for students. I just want to see where everyone is at. Hello from Fresno Pacific University. Those are our friends over there in California. Okay, so I'll just give it a few more seconds for you guys to answer that. Then I'll end it here. Okay, so it looks like we have 25% have it as a co-rec and 75% have a different solution for providing that. Okay, so stop sharing here. All right, so at Peregrine, we believe in taking a solutions-based approach to solving the needs of our thought partners. And if you are a partner, you probably know that. So we were really hearing from many of our clients that their students were struggling with academic writing. Most faculty agreed that it is essential to teach academic writing to university students, but many would prefer to use their time to evaluate based on content and not the format of their writing. So these conversations prompted further research, and we found that many students are entering programs at various levels with no formal instruction on academic writing or even knowing what the term bibliography means. And we were seeing this across the board, not just limited to adults returning to higher education. We also found that several institutions have students who require remediation upon entering their program, and the numbers show that for many, just the prospect of this requirement is discouraging enough for them to discontinue their academic journey.
Thank you, Ashley. I gotta tell you, I can't tell you, I can't tell you how many times I had students accidentally plagiarize at the beginning of the semester. Right? It was a student who maybe they just graduated high school for whatever reason, they didn't learn those skills or pay attention to those skills being taught in K-12 education, or it was somebody who hadn't been in school for many, many years, and they would come in and they'd write their first paper, and they were so proud of their paper, and then I'd go and use one of our tools to check plagiarism, and oh gosh, 70% of this paper is plagiarized. And so I'd have a conversation with a student. Well, I did what you said. You said to find sources, come up with how to put those sources together, right? To express this idea, and that's what I did. But then, they didn't realize that taking it word for word is not what you're supposed to do. And so I had to spend a lot of time in my English classes teaching students, even students who scored well on their placement tests to get into my class, or who had ACT scores or SAT scores that should have placed them into my class, spending a lot of time educating students on not just how to cite their sources, but how to use quotations and how to paraphrase, and what is plagiarism and what is not, and the consequences of plagiarism, let alone all of the other things we need to do to write academically. And we're going to discuss some of those in a little bit, such as, grammar, writing in a formal tone or an academic tone. With the age of texting, we see over and over again that students will come to us and they'll write just like they text their friends. And there is a reason that we need them to write academically, right? We need them to be able to coherently communicate their ideas, and we'll discuss more of that later. But I thought I'd talk about how costly remedial courses are, because I'm talking about, gosh, this was such a pain point of mine that I couldn't get through all the content I needed to, or I had to rush through that content because we really had to back up and spend some time on those foundational, on that foundational knowledge and skills. So you would think, oh, well, Desiree, remedial courses is the solution. Unfortunately, we found that remedial courses are costly. It's estimated that remedial courses cost students and their families about 1.3 billion in the United States each year, according to the Center for American Progress. Additionally, research in 2016 showed that anywhere from 40 to 60% of first-year college students require remediation in college, math, or both. Other studies show that it's as much as 70% of students are told that they need to take remedial courses. We also know that by adding these courses, they don't count towards a degree and decrease the likelihood of completion. What we have seen is that on-time completion rates of students that are required to take remedial courses is consistently less than 10%. So one solution that a lot of institutions have implemented, and you may have implemented at your institution, is to start using co-requisites instead of prerequisites. When I left teaching to come here to Peregrine, that we were in the middle of offering both co-requisites and prerequisites. From my anecdotal experience, I can tell you my co-requisite students were a lot more successful because their co-requisite instructors and I were working together to support that student. Community College Research Center at Columbia University and Lynn at University of Southern California studied 8 years of student records at the 13 community colleges in Tennessee, which was the first state to ever, or group of higher education institutions that implemented co-requisite courses kind of on that grand scale. According to the study, students into co-requisite classes were 15 percentage points more likely to pass a gateway math course and 13 percentage points more likely to pass a gateway English course within 1 year of enrollment than similar students placed into traditional remedial courses. The analysis also compared students in co-requisite math and English courses to those who scored high enough on the assessment to enter a traditional level course. And what they found was really interesting. They found that the co-requisite students that completed their gateway course had similar completion rates as those who didn't need support in both math and English, affirming claims of advocates who say co-requisite courses are a powerful tool for ensuring that students pass these all-important milestones. This part of the study compared students who had just made or missed the cutoff for placement. So that's really exciting. We can see that based on what I just told you, that co-requisite courses are an effective way of improving learning outcomes in those gateway courses, in their English courses. What's really interesting to me though is in the study, and you know, more research should be done, is they didn't find any significant effects of co-requisite remediation on enrollment persistence, transfer to four-year colleges, or degree completion. So even though it's better at improving learning outcomes than prerequisites, I think that we still need to work on what is the solution to really supporting students long term, right? Beyond a co-requisite class. What are some other things that we can do that we can either couple with our co-requisite classes, couple with our prerequisite classes if we can't move from that model for any reason, or use as a standalone solution? And so we're going to talk about that.
Thank you for that information, Desiree. So even more reason to provide some type of resource for students to help them be successful. So we wanted students to start thinking about the purpose behind their writing. So we wanted them to have more creativity when brainstorming topics and really take a wide view when conducting their research, and to also keep their audience in mind when they're crafting their submission. So we wanted them to point the audience in a new direction and lead them to something that they hadn't maybe heard before, or they hadn't looked at it in that way before. So we designed this solution to help them improve their writing and English skills, but to also improve how they think about writing. So this not only helps them in your program to be successful in your program, but it also helps them once they leave and become a professional in the workplace, because they can take those skills and apply them when they do go out into the workforce.
Yes, and so it's what we just told you is why we're here, because Peregrine really believes that we can impact the quality of higher education with you as our partner, and we want to help you find a solution. And it's hard. Because we have the struggle of our students needing the foundational skills to be in place when they come into our classroom, whether that's a gateway classroom like an English class, or maybe that's a business classroom or a healthcare administration classroom, right? Or whatever the program is, we need those foundational skills. But at the same time, we have to be cognizant of the barriers or the issues that requiring remedial courses causes. So because of that, we've developed a solution, and we call that Write and Cite. Now, Write and Cite is a program that there are a ton of reasons or ways that you could integrate it or use it at your institution. What's really neat is students have access to what this is called a module. So it's self-guided online content that they have access to for 2 years. Maybe students are, maybe the reason you want to integrate it is because students aren't structuring their assignments in a cohesive way. Maybe they don't know how to connect ideas or think critically or do research. Maybe you are running into the same thing I am, where students don't have a good grasp of how to cite their sources, or you're sending a lot of students to the writing lab, but you're not actually seeing any accountability that they're doing something in the writing lab. Or maybe it's any of those different things. And what you can use is Write and Cite as a solution, right? So if I had that student that accidentally plagiarized, one of the ways I would use it is I would say, okay, so that's a tool for remediation when that case occurs, right? We have a conversation with my chair or my dean or whoever it is within the institution, because that's where academic integrity issues go to. And then the solution to it is not to fail that student for plagiarism, but to actually provide some remediation as a first strike, and then or maybe it's available in the writing lab, or maybe it's just a requirement for all students, or students who score below a certain point on their entrance exams into your institution. So we've discussed a little bit about how you would integrate Write and Cite, why you would integrate Write and Cite, and how. And how you do it is just going to depend on you, but we do have some applications and best practices. And this could be to assess your learners' academic writing skills. One, we'll get into it, but Write and Cite does have a competency-based assessment, which is really nice. So a pre and a post assessment built into it, so that students can see where they may have some knowledge gaps at the pre-assessment and really know what they need to pay attention to, and even know what their strengths are, which is good. And then a post assessment for academic accountability. Just like I discussed, you could provide it through your writing center. You could use it as remediation for plagiarism, assist course faculty with understanding and evaluating written assignments, teach the depth and breadth of workplace writing requirements, and include it within an academic leveling program. What is really neat, and we'll share some more of, is Write and Cite measures not measures, it can be used at the graduate level. Not only does it apply at the undergraduate level when students are first entering into their college studies, but it goes into dissertations and theses and more of those advanced topics. So that way you can prep your graduate level students to be able to write at the level that you need them to write at. And maybe you need Write and Cite as part of a remediation process for students who have committed on academic honesty violation, just like I had said. And perhaps sometimes it was blatant. But I do think that oftentimes, and I want to reiterate this because I think it's so important. I think a lot of times students don't mean to plagiarize. So I think having a resource like this is really important.
Thank you for that information, Desiree. There are several ways to incorporate Write and Cite. It really just depends on your institution and where you're really struggling and where you can see that fit in. I've also worked with some of our partners who decided to use it for their faculty. So some of their faculty members were coming in from the corporate world, and it had been a while since they had written academically themselves, but they were required to evaluate writing assignments for their students. So they had their faculty go through Write and Cite as well. So that's just another idea of the many ways that you can implement that. So Write and Cite also helps to address programmatic and institutional accreditation requirements. So if you do work with those different accreditors, you know that they want you to ensure that your students are set up for success when they begin your program. So this solution really helps to build the foundation for academic writing, which can improve, like Desiree mentioned, retention and graduation rates for students having that foundation. So Write and Cite is designed with learning outcomes for each of the sections and lends to accountability. Like Desiree mentioned, it has that pre-test and post-test approach. So students are really able to see their knowledge gain at the end once they complete that module, and you as faculty or program coordinators are able to see that as well. So Write and Cite includes 8 modules with core lessons to help students with style and grammar, research and structure, ways to credit other people's ideas without committing plagiarism, which is a big one, right? And also how to adhere to professional publication standards. So Write and Cite is customized to your preferred method of documentation style. So that might be APA for you, that might be MLA or Chicago Manual style. So now I'm going to go over what each section in the module includes. So we're really going to dig into this. So that pre-test is 20 questions, And it gives students and the program the baseline knowledge students have about academic writing before accessing any of that module material.
And Ashley, can I ask a question about, could schools use that pre-test as a way to make students exempt from having to complete the module?
Yeah, absolutely. So you might set a minimum required score, just depending on your institution. That could be 70% or 80%. And then say, okay, this student really was able to access some resources. Maybe that was in some classes in high school, or maybe in their community college, or wherever they came from, and they really have that foundation. They don't necessarily need that module material. They would still have access to it. So say the student got an 80%, but they really want to just have that extra knowledge, they certainly have access to the module with that 20 question pretest, but you could just have it as a test out score. Yes, Desiree, that is a good question. So the section 1 of Write and Cite defines academic writing. So this section sets the expectations for academic writing. This is especially helpful, like Desiree mentioned earlier, for those students who have become more comfortable with social media or an informal type of writing. So we want to move them away from the informal writing, but also guide them not to be so formal and alienating that students are throwing in all the vocabulary they can to impress the reader. So we teach them that academic writing should be clear, logical, and lead their reader down a path to a solid conclusion. Section 2 is going to provide students with an overview of the different type of assignments they will regularly face in their courses and the format, requirements, and expectations for each of those. So for example, a discussion post is a formal type of writing. It needs to not just be a response to someone else, but also needs to have their thought, back it up with research, and open up new areas for discussion. So the module discusses the different types of essays and keeping the audience in mind as you're writing, and it'll go over the requirements for case studies, research papers, theses, and dissertations. So it kind of goes through all of those different assignments that students are going to experience throughout their academic journey. So once they understand the assignment, section 3 leads them into the different types of resources that they might use for their research. So students might go into the library or find something online, but we really want them to open their eyes to primary and secondary sources. So when they're finding work online, we want them to question the credibility, to dig in a little deeper into the organization behind each website to find out what bias might be present. We want them to understand that peer-reviewed journal articles are the foundation of academic research, and sometimes that might be intimidating for new students. We teach them how to find those articles, how to parse them, how to get the information they need, and then we want them to know all the options for thorough, credible research so they aren't backing up their research papers with online websites and Wikipedia. Section 4 goes into the practical considerations. So it goes into the style, grammar, and structure of making a persuasive and convincing paper, teaching students that less is sometimes more, and then how to turn the reader's glance towards a different place and help them see things a different way. And then the next 3 modules are customized to your preferred documentation style. So I mentioned those earlier, APA, MLA, CMS formats. So this section is going to go into the technical requirements for the different styles, including format, citing, and references, and then how to structure those correctly. Section 6 goes over the requirements for correct in-text citations, depending on your preferred documentation style, to help the writer with avoiding plagiarism. Or, for example, maybe they have 2 sources that say the exact same thing. So how do you reference those at the same time? And then the next section, section 7, focuses on the reference page and how to properly format those depending on the source type. And then it also explains the importance of a reference page. So some students might not really understand that. They might just see that they're required to make a reference page because they have to, but it helps them understand and explain the importance of this for the reader. So the reader might want to go in and use the reference page to look further into the sources that they cited throughout their paper. Maybe they want to dig a little deeper into that information. Maybe it intrigues them and they want to see the the full article or information behind that. So like I said, we really want students to think about their writing, not just these are the requirements. And then finally, the last section of the module is about finalizing the paper. So I think Desiree has mentioned this to me before as being really, really important, because you've taken your time, you write your paper, but then how do you look over everything? How do you look for errors? How do you make sure that you were clear in what you were explaining? Did you skip over something? What parts of your paper, when you read it as a whole, might diverge from the original idea? So the final submission is polished and persuasive. And then the last step in completing that module is our 50-question post-test. So this is where most of our partner institutions will require that minimum score for students. Students are allowed 2 attempts at the post-test. So if they do fail that first attempt at the post-test, we recommend that students go back through the material and use their second attempt once they feel they have retained the content. So their post-test is going to give their competency in each of those areas. So they are able to see, okay, what areas did I really not grasp? Was it the research? Was it citing? Was it the structure? So they can really go in and cover that section in the module and more in depth and feel like they retain that content before they attempt that post-test again. And then students, like I said, will receive their competency in each of those areas. So they receive a completion certificate. And this is where they can dig into each of those areas, see their score, and then maybe go back and use that to study a little bit more. Okay, so now that I've went over everything that is in the module in those different sections, I want to give you some information on client admin. So with Peregrine Solutions, institutions receive access to our client admin portal. So our client admin portal is where all of your data is stored. And then you have several reporting options available depending on what solutions you use from Peregrine. So there's 2 different reports available with the Write and Cite module. So the first report that we're looking at right now is the individual results report. So that's going to show each student individually how they scored in each of those areas. So you're able to look at your students as a whole, and then on the individual level, where are they doing well and where they might be struggling. So with this, I usually work with our partners to look at the individual results report and see, okay, the student got an 86% on the post-test, good, they can move through our program. But if you really look at those individual areas, maybe they made up for their score in a different area, but they were still low in that research section. So you could come up with some type of assignment or project for your student to focus on, to be able to make sure that they are competent in that area and have those strengths before moving on throughout your program. And then the second report available is the Write and Cite report, which is a comprehensive report that shows your students as a whole and how they scored in each of those areas. So what we're looking at here, the blue is going to be their pre-test score and the yellow is going to be their post-test score. And then you have an overall average, those 2 vertical lines that are running, the red and the green, to show you as a whole, how did those students do? So you're able to evaluate that knowledge gain based on completion scores for the pre-test and post-test.
Hey, thank you, Ashley. Real quick, I just wanted to mention that what's really neat about having the access to the client admin and having all these scores is that, and maybe you're not working on accreditation, but when your institution is working on even institutional or regional accreditation, they can utilize this practice and these scores to show the impact they're making to improve, or the actions they're taking to improve the quality of education, which I think is really neat.
It is. Okay, so let's go into the learner experience now for the modules. So our modules are dynamic and engaging. They include activities to help students retain those concepts. So some of the activities throughout the module includes flip cards, so they're able to test their knowledge on that. And then there's matching concepts. And then there's also a quiz at the end of each section, just to make sure that the learner is comfortable with the material before moving on throughout the module. So it really just helps reinforce that and help students stop at each of those sections and see, okay, did I retain that knowledge? Do I feel comfortable with it? Or should I kind of go back through and read up a little bit more on some of that information? The module is easy to navigate and students are able to see their progress throughout. So like I don't know if we mentioned this or not, but we found it valuable that if students have access to this for 2 years after they activate it, they're able to use it as a resource throughout their program. So say they take Write and Cite in the beginning of your program, just you make it a minimum required score, but then, later on down the road, they have a research paper, they can go back to that Write and Cite module, click on that research section and just refresh their knowledge. Okay, what is this going to ask me to do? What are the different steps that I need to complete to work on this research paper? So it is very valuable that students have access to that for 2 years after they activate it, should they need to go back and look at that information. Awesome. So getting started, let's answer some important questions for you guys that you're probably asking. Okay, how do we implement this? How does it work? So with all of our solutions, we can integrate directly into your learning management system. So maybe that's an assignment through Canvas or Blackboard, Moodle. We can integrate that, or we can utilize a school branded microsite. So with a microsite, that is a link and a unique password for your institutions, which allows students to go in and self-register for that. So maybe you have it just as an option for students to take. They can go in and self-register. And then the module can be the module can be set up with your preferred method of cost coverage. So some institutions that we work with are lucky enough that they're able to utilize their own budget to purchase this for their students. That is, usually rare and not always the case. So some will require students to purchase that on their own. We can also work through your bookstore to sell activation codes for those students who are utilizing financial aid. So we can just work with you to determine how this best works for your program and set that up with you. And then the pricing is based on volume discounts of services used by the entire institution. So say your business program utilizes our business administration assessments for a program level assessment for accreditation. We take those services into account. So if you have 1 to 100 services per year, that is $49, and then drops down to those different volume discounts depending on the number of services you use. So like I said earlier, we will work with you to find out what works best for you. All right, so we are going to take some time to answer questions. I don't know, Desiree, is there anything that you want to add that maybe we missed?
No, I don't think so, but I have some questions in the Q&A. And the first one asks about how long does it take to get through the content within Write and Cite? And that's a great question. So the answer is about 4 to 6 hours is how long it would take if you were to sit down and just move through it all at one time. Okay. And then there's one other question. It says, could this be used as course content? Okay. All right. So they're asking, could you use this as kind of like your textbook for, your remedial or co-requisite classes? And the answer is yes. I think it's actually a fantastic idea to, instead of having, you could work on, because this really is the knowledge part of it, right? Like the knowledge-based part of it. How to cite your sources. What does it mean to write in an academic tone? You're not actually practicing writing within this module. So it would be really great to accompany a course in writing because you would be able to concentrate on application within the classroom. But then this would provide students with everything they need on that theory and knowledge side. And you don't have to count on them reading their textbooks. I instituted a thing instituted a practice when I was teaching where I'd ask students to raise their hand if they read the required reading every class. And if they didn't, I would always say, thank you for being honest. And so they were always honest. And I always had a really good idea of how many students read their required reading. But with Write and Cite, you can measure their progress. And as they complete sections, you can see that, which really is a great way to know kind of, you can tell your students, I'm going to know whether you actually are moving through this or not.
Good point.
Somebody asked, can we be given access to a demo site to try this out before deciding if it will work for our students? I want to make sure it's appropriate for MBA students. Absolutely. Right, Ashley?
Yes, absolutely. We would be happy to provide you with guest access to that. You would see exactly what the students would experience. So we can certainly send you guest access.
Thank you, Kathy. All right. Any other questions? Nope. It looks, but we got 3 really good ones. So
Yes, those are
that's,
very good.
yes. All right. Well, we will follow up with you after this webinar, right, Ashley?
Yes, we will.
So, and we'll provide you with, if you want to learn more, you can do a one-on-one meeting with us to talk about how you could integrate Write and Cite into your program, or to get guest site access so that you can see what the module looks like firsthand and kind of explore that student experience as well.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a great day.